Hey guys, it's Stephanie Mo Davis. So I'm here today to talk about how developing your sense of self-awareness will completely change your life. Okay? So this is something I've been working on within myself for at least, I'd say, 6-7 years post my last kidney transplant. All right? So in terms of healing and feeling well, very often we think somebody that has kidney disease would probably not feel so hot. And some of you out there may be suffering with conditions yourself, such as something severe to something severe mentally, like tremendous anxiety or depression, or maybe one of the plethora of autoimmune diseases that exist nowadays. We're really truly in an epidemic of not feeling great. And to be quite frank, very often we're creating new conditions in the medical field to try to somewhat pigeonhole and label what people are suffering with because people feel more comfortable when they have a diagnosis. What I'm going to say to you is that I've spent a large portion of my life living with autoimmunity and chronic disease. I was on dialysis a couple of times and I've had 2 organ transplants. That was a significant part of my process, to go through that suffering, right? To understand the contrast of and the exuberance of what it feels like to be well. And post my second kidney transplant, I realized that I was having a lot of similar feelings that I had post my first kidney transplant. Whereas very often there's this light at the end of the tunnel if you're so lucky to receive a transplant. Or for instance, with yourself, is if there's something you're physically dealing with, to have a diagnosis or to have a proper medication or to have some way to feel as though there's a means to an end can sometimes provide a large amount of comfort and even security. And after my last transplant, which I see happen to the majority of transplant patients, depending on how their life was organized and looked prior to their illness, most people who have chronic illness, this doesn't just happen randomly. There's a set of circumstances, whether conscious and expressed or intrinsic and internal, that somehow are contributing to a lack of immunity. Again, very often we are not aware of this. When I was diagnosed with my autoimmune condition, I was living my best life, I thought. I was doing all of the things right society would tell us to do to promote health and wellness, okay? I was doing all of those things. I was eating well, I was doing yoga, I was a vegetarian, I was in a good relationship, I was praying, I was walking, I was exercising, all of the things I was doing. But what I realized, and in retrospect I see, was that I had a lot of internal emotional things that I was keeping trapped that were contributing to my sense of dis-ease. It manifested, it became a condition that I needed to address, and going through that process was incredibly humbling to realize within myself what it actually takes to feel better, to feel well. Yes, when you're in kidney failure, to be blessed with a kidney is obviously going to make you feel better, but that is not even the beginning of what it takes for most people who've experienced severe illness or long-term bouts with conditions, what it takes to feel well. You need to understand your process. You need to understand and reflect and have the time to process what had happened to you in a way where you're not just totally excited because there's a means to an end, but in a sustaining way that's not always linear, of a balance between your now physical, more healthy potential body and your spiritual body and your emotions and your mental body. All right, so forever we've heard of this concept of mind, body, spirit. Turns out it's actually true. So the mind, body, spirit complex, if one of those is off balance, they're all off balance. You can fake it until you try to make it as long as you'd like, but at one point in your existence, it's gonna pop up. Something is going to pop up if there is an incongruency in one of those. Most of you know right? That if you're in kidney failure, you're probably going to have some anxiousness and depression. Just comes along with facing your potential mortality and the existential shift that you're going through in life. It's not addressed in the process of the traditional model. This is something we're working on, trying to improve. Often we're told to potentially see a psychologist, which most of us in end-stage renal disease do not have insurance to properly cover. There's tremendous gaps in the system, but people are working on this, thankfully. But all of those three things, your mental body, your spiritual body, your sense of when you're facing your mortality, you cannot help but think, what is next? All right, even if you're agnostic, atheist, when you are that close to death, you cannot help but ponder the afterlife and your faith. It's just a part of the process. So all of these things come into play when you're dealing with an illness, and they all must be addressed at one point or another. My most profound shift and transformation in my process with my physical illness did not occur until years after my transplant, when I addressed the other aspects of myself that needed to be, where the fragments needed to come back into myself so I could heal myself, right? Like that beautiful practice of Japanese art, I forget what it's called, where the vase is broken, they put it back together with gold, and it's even more beautiful because of its brokenness. That's exactly what we need to do as humans. All right, we need to discover the fragments of ourselves that we have not addressed, our blind spots. We all have blind spots. Jungian philosophy will call this the shadow, and that was some of the most profound work I did for my own health and wellness. I was a yoga teacher for many, many, many years, and I went down that kind of linear process of experimenting with lots of external things to try to help me feel better. But it wasn't until I stopped doing all of those and truly went within, and I did shadow work and mirror work, and I had somebody in my life, thankfully, to be able to do this with. And it was completely triggering, but completely beautiful, because I was dedicated to really looking at myself with a more clear lens. And no matter how old you are, no matter how educated you are, no matter how big your ego is, no matter how humble you claim you are, we all need to do this inner reflection and shadow work. And I was hoping with my selfish self that during this past year of COVID, that many of us would be doing that. We would be, what I see is that, it's kind of a joke. The introverts had no time with the pandemic, and the extroverts had a terrible time with the pandemic. So what this year, I feel, has an opportunity to really bring us, insofar as our own internal healing, which then eventually will reflect externally, is your ability to seek your blind spots out and to explore your opposites. So people who are introverted, who had no problem with the pandemic, staying home alone and doing their fun, nerdy things that they like to do, such as myself, it's now time for me I've integrated this and really become the extrovert, and to take my knowledge and my wisdom really out there solidly and succinctly, in a way that I don't want to just hide in the background with all of these beautiful things that I want to offer the world. You need to come out. And for many of the extroverts who are used to being out and about with everybody, doing all of the things and traveling and this and that, if they're fortunate enough to be doing that, it's now time maybe for you to become more introverted in your perspective of your own blind spots, to become less fragmented and more whole. Because no matter what, we all could use a little more compassion and love. If you're in a divide and conquer mentality, if you have severe biases that trouble you and you get angry at people, you are not yourself. I know this because I was this person. Everything that I talk about, I was this person. Okay, I am you, I am human, just like everybody else is. I'm no better, I'm just sharing with you my process. So explore your pole, okay? I think that, a couple of years ago, I said on my Facebook page, woke is gonna be the word of, I forget what it was, 2018. What I didn't realize is that we have this movement that had happened of wokeness, but it became completely distorted. It distorted and it fragmented, just like everything beautiful has the opportunity to distort and fragment. So you always have to be willing to look at multiple sides. You can't just claim your one thing and label yourself as one thing, and this is my mission in the world, and I'm a social activist, and this is what I hate this person, and Donald Trump, da da da. If that's how you are, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. And it's up to you. If you would like to suffer, which I tried to do for a long time, more power to you. But I found in trying to broaden my perspective and be more understanding of a multitude of views and understand that their views are coming from their life's experiences and what they were taught. And we don't need to demonize everybody that has a thought that's not exactly in line with what we think. We're all different. But I do think at the core of every single one of us, not all, but most, is the fact that we want to love each other, we want to evolve as a society, we want to help each other, and we want to improve. So if you are fighting, if you are in anger, you are not yourself. If you are fighting others and you hate other people, you are not yourself. You have work to do, okay? So we want to get to this place where Socratic dialoguing is common. We can hear other people's opinions, we can talk, we can try to work it out, and we don't have to force our agenda onto anybody. That's ego. It's ego. It's not mature. We need a rising up of adulthood again, or maybe for the first time ever. We need to be able to hold this space, and we need to be able to look at our shadows and have the conversations with people who are different than us. Sit down and get to know somebody who has an opposite viewpoint. And you may just learn something, and your heart may crack open to the point where you realize that we've all been through something, and we all have viewpoints coming through the lens of our own personal perception. And not everybody's you, and not everybody should be you, okay? So be easy. We're a society that is still tremendously in the beginning stages of understanding all of this, and we're evolving on top of it. So reevaluate your belief systems. If you're angry, you're not yourself. Consider doing some shadow work, or maybe speaking to somebody who is really skilled in a Jungian style of inner intrinsic work. Doing all the things outside are helpful, but only to an extent, okay? You will have to continue to do them day after day after day to feel well. And when you can't go to the gym or the country club or whatever your means of escapism was, travel, we all see what happens. The pandemic happens and you lose it. You lose it. Because you're not balanced. You cannot hold multiple perspectives solidly and have comfort with the multi-dimensionality that is this planet and our human experience, okay? So explore your opposites, explore your polarities. I think you're gonna hear this word a ton this year. It's already been talked about. Discover your shadow side. When I say shadow, I don't mean evil, I don't mean dark. I mean your blind spots you can't see. Okay, very often they're pointed out to you very, very effortlessly in people who bother you, especially family members and close loved ones. So when you feel those triggers, don't immediately project. Just stop and say, okay, why am I so bothered? Just do some intrinsic, internal work. See their reflection as a means for you and an opportunity to heal, instead of you telling them how they should be acting like some weird proxy parent who hasn't done their own work. Okay? That's all I want to say today, guys. We'll talk soon. Bye.